Hello everyone! I know I promised I would give you 2 videos this week, but things got a little bit hectic with work and preparing for the move, which as you can see, the apartment right now is a giant mess as I'm preparing to move everything out. This will actually be the final time that you see this particular apartment, and all future videos will take place at my new humble abode. So, you're going to get one video from me this week, but it will encompass everything that I promised. So you're going to get a preview of the Royal Rumble, a preview of NXT Takeover, and my classic match review for January 2017, which, as voted by you, will be Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair from 1993. That episode of Raw. A very early episode of Raw, I might add. So, with all that said, let's get started. A lot to get through. We've got 2 big shows this weekend, neither of which I'll be able to see because I'll be moving all weekend. I'm not going to feel like watching anything. You have NXT Takeover San Antonio and the Royal Rumble, the 2017 edition of the annual event, to really kick off the WrestleMania season. And, you know, often the comment is made that the NXT TakeOver specials are better than the main roster WWE shows that it's attached to. A perfect example would be last year's Dallas show, where NXT TakeOver Dallas, even with a main event that was flawed, was twice the show that WrestleMania 32 was. I mean, no question which one was the better, more complete show. And it's pretty much always been the case where the NXT show has been better than the WWE, the main roster WWE show that follows it. I'm looking at the 2 cards here. If this TakeOver special manages to be better than the Royal Rumble, then the main roster production team and the writers and the roster should be absolutely ashamed of themselves, because this is the weakest NXT TakeOver card ever that they've ever put on since they've started doing the TakeOver specials. I mean, this one is kind of the culmination of the roster being depleted following the night after WrestleMania and the draft. Between those 2 things, they lost a lot of talent. And I think this show is kind of the major indicator of the talents that they've lost, and they didn't really do anything to try and hide it. I think it's the main reason we got Nakamura versus Joe seemingly 800 times, because the roster just got depleted and they haven't been able to fill a lot of those spots yet. I mean, with that, let's get started. This card has 5 matches on it. First up, we've got Roderick Strong taking on Andrade Cien Almas. I mean, I don't know what to say about this match. It's just there. And I should preface all of this by saying that another main problem with this is that typically the NXT TakeOver specials have benefited from a long build-up. This show doesn't really feel like it has that, and I think a large part of it is that during the Christmas season, we kind of got a bunch of house show specials rather than straight-up NXT episodes to really build the story, so it really doesn't feel like a lot of these matches have huge stories behind them. And this really does feel like a thrown-together card, even though they've probably had it mapped out since the last TakeOver special. There's just been so little advancement and so many breaks that it doesn't feel like it. So, yeah, it is what it is. But Roderick Strong versus Andrade Cien Almas, I mean, I could not possibly care any less about this match. I've never been interested in Roderick Strong at all. I'm not saying he's never had a good match. I'm saying I've never personally found him to be that interesting or exciting or engaging. Then you have Almas, who he's better as a heel, but when the babyface is Roderick Strong, I'm just not going to care. So, really, this match is what it is. I just don't care. And it's a shame, too, because sometimes when you get guys and put them in a different setting, that helps to breathe fresh air into them and give me a fresh new perspective on those guys. A perfect example is Evan Bourne, Matt Sydal. In the Indies, I thought he was kind of boring and kind of meshed with everybody else. He's like, yeah, he can do a shooting star press, and yeah, he can do these cool high-flying moves, but tons of guys his same size that are more charismatic than him can do those things too, so who cares? You put him on the WWE roster where nobody at the time was doing those things, and he stands out. So, okay, maybe Roderick Strong, putting him in NXT, maybe that'll give me a new fresh perspective on him. Maybe he'll get better, and I'll like him more. That has not happened yet. He's still boring. I still just look at him and I'm fighting the urge to fall asleep. I just find the guy to be boring, and that's just how it is. And this match isn't going to be very interesting to me, but whatever. Who wins? I don't care. Probably Strong, but I don't really care, to be perfectly honest. Next up, we have Ty Dillinger versus Eric Young. I think this match could be the sleeper hit of the show. I like Sanity. I like the gimmick, even though I'm almost certain they're going to screw it up when it gets to the main roster. I think Eric Young is kind of transitioned into the character that TNA was trying to turn him into, but just didn't have the direction or end game or creativity behind it to really make it work. I think Ty Dillinger is kind of becoming I talked about how the NXT roster was depleted and how they're looking to fill voids. I think Ty Dillinger has a shot to be the next Sami Zayn of NXT. Not that he's as good of a worker, but I think he's really creating this great underdog character for himself and is really getting the sympathy of the crowd. And I think he's really winning them over, and I think he's doing really well. So, I don't know. This match, I'm looking at this. Who goes over here? This one's a tough one to call. Do you have the leader of the heel faction lose, or do you have the underdog babyface finally get his big win at an NXT Takeover special? Because, and I'll talk about this more when I get into the main event. I mean, I think if it's not in the works already, they might throw Ty up into the world title scene. Who knows? So I'll pick Ty to win, but I can see it going either way for various reasons. There's justifications for giving the win to either guy. So I think that can wind up being one of the better matches on the show. Then we have the women's 4-way title match. Asuka defending against Nikki Cross of Sanity, Billie Kay, and Peyton Royce. On paper, this is the worst women's match to ever be done in a TakeOver special. And again, this is symptomatic of the roster being depleted. I made the comment when Alexa Bliss and Carmella were drafted to SmackDown. I was a little surprised by that. Nia Jax over to Raw as well. I was a little surprised by that because I thought with Sasha, Bayley, who was a certainty to move up, even though Carmella and Alexa Bliss went up before she did, with the 4 horsewomen moving up to the main roster, I thought, okay, Alexa Bliss, Carmella, and Nia are going to fill those spots now. And that didn't really happen because they all got drafted. It was like, oh, okay. So they kind of skipped a step, and it left the women's division on NXT. It's like, all right, it's Asuka and a bunch of people we don't know. And Ember Moon seems to be the only one that they're really building up. Again, they obviously want to save Asuka versus Ember Moon, which is smart, and I agree with that. Nikki Cross is still new. Again, she's part of Sanity, and the gimmick's great and everything, but she's still new and establishing herself. And I feel like this, making it a 4-way with Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, I feel like it's, they're making it a 4-way so that they can do Asuka versus Nikki Cross without having either one of them lose. Specifically without having Nikki lose. I expect Billie Kay or Peyton Royce to take the pin here. I'm going to pick Asuka to retain because, like I said, I think they're going to do Asuka versus Ember Moon for WrestleMania weekend. But this match is just not that interesting. Part of it is just Billie Kay and Peyton Royce just haven't really won me over at all. I'm not saying they're terrible. I just don't. They just haven't done anything to give me much to be excited about. And I would have rather they just done Asuka versus Nikki Cross 1-on-1, but I don't think they want to have Nikki get straight up beaten. So that's why they're making this a 4-way. But I guess there is some intrigue there because there is that idea that it's, all right, she's defending the title against 3 women, so that increases the chance of Asuka actually losing the title, although I don't think she will, but excuse me. But we'll see. As is, though, I'm not that interested in this match overall. I feel like this is just biding time for a bigger match down the road. Then we have the NXT Tag Title match, DIY defending against the Authors of Pain. I'm fine with this. I don't think it'll be as good as the Revival DIY matches or the Revival American Alpha matches. I'm a little disappointed that the Revival is being left off this card entirely, but I'm fine with this. I like the Authors of Pain. They're they're a big old beat the shit out of you bruiser tag team, and I love those. And they've been built convincingly. I think Ellering is a great voice piece for them, a great mouthpiece, I should say. And, they've been built up. They've been, I think, unbeaten, and they won the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. So, they've been built up well, and personally, I'd consider putting the belts on them. I think, and that's my mindset. I feel like storylines are better when the heels hold the belts and the baby faces are playing the chasers. So it's like, all right, DIY, they got their big win. They've beaten the Revival in the rematches. So it's like, all right, let's put the titles on the big bruiser monsters now and see if we can grow the tag team division around that. See what we can do with it. So I think this match will be fine. I don't think it'll, like I said, I don't think it'll be as good as some of the previous NXT tag title matches that we've seen recently. But I think it'll be fine, and I think Authors of Pain should probably win the belts here. Then we have the main event, Bobby Roode versus Shinsuke Nakamura, a match that feels like it has no build-up because we got Samoa Joe and Nakamura so many goddamn times. It was like time froze on NXT, which is something that never happened on NXT. Where they would do a match so many times that I would get sick of seeing it, but goddamn, I do not want to see Nakamura and Joe anymore. I'm not saying the matches were bad, I was just like, alright, I feel like we've got this. Honestly, I feel like we've gotten it like 5 or 6 times, and I don't want to see it anymore. So, I think Bobby Roode is a good challenger for Nakamura. I think it'll be a very different match from what we've seen. Their styles are so different from each other. I'm not sure how well they're going to mesh. I think Joe's style and Balor's style complement Nakamura. I'd like to see what Nakamura can do with somebody of more traditional American style, more traditional, like that old school 80s wrestling style, like a Bobby Roode. I'd like to see what he can do with somebody like that. I think it could make for a really fun match, actually. If it were up to me, I'd have Bobby Roode win the title and then build up Ty Dillinger to ultimately face him and possibly beat him for the belt. Again, we'll see. My preference, again, I like heels being on top. I would have Bobby Roode win the title here, but those are my feelings on the NXT Takeover special. It really doesn't have anything that makes me want to go out of my way to see it. Again, part of that is lack of build-up. Part of that is just the matches just don't look that interesting overall. I think on paper this is the weakest Takeover card to date. They're going to have a lot to overcome to not have that happen. And it's possible, not everything on paper turns out the way it appears in execution, so we'll see how that all goes. But right now, it's like, man, I'm really underwhelmed for this NXT TakeOver special, and I've never said that before. But, it is what it is. And with that, let's jump into previewing the Royal Rumble, the big show that's happening this weekend. We've got 3 pre-show matches, Sasha Banks versus Nia Jax, which should be fine. I still don't like Sasha Banks as a face, but I like that there's actually like non-title women's feuds. If you look at the Cruiserweight division, there's a ton of like Cruiserweight feuds going on right now. Jack Gallagher and Arya Daivari just had their big blow-off in the I Forfeit match. So it's like, oh yay, it's like an actual division. It's not just all about the title. There are a bunch of competitors competing and feuding with each other, trying to get wins to move up the rankings to ultimately get to the belt. It's not just every match involving the division has the belt involved, which I like. So we have that match, Sasha versus Nia Jax. We've got the SmackDown women. I think it's Becky Lynch, Nikki Bella, and I'm trying to think of who are the babyface women. And Naomi, I think, versus Alexa Bliss, Mickie James, and Natalya, I think it is. So I'm just assuming that based on the storylines that are going on right now. But that match will probably be okay. And then there's the WWE Raw Tag Title match. Sheamus and Cesaro versus The Club with 2 referees at ringside to ensure that everything goes down fair and square. This match would be fine if The Club hadn't been bastardized so much. The Club, I do not view them as a threat because they have had dozens of tag title matches and they've lost all of them. So at this point, it just feels like they're getting a tag title shot because Cesaro and Sheamus need to feud with somebody before whoever, the WrestleMania tag title match, whatever that match is going to be. I feel like at WrestleMania we're going to get Enzo and Cass versus the New Day in some way, shape, or form. Maybe with Cesaro and Sheamus thrown in to make it a 3-way, but I just don't see the Club factoring in and being a major component. And if they are, they'll just be the 4th or 3rd or 5th or whatever. They'll just be the other team thrown in there, and that's it. So, Um. So yeah, I guess those are my feelings on that match. I'm picking Cesaro and Sheamus to retain. I don't really care all that much because they've done so little with the club in terms of making them seem like a threat that I just can't really care about them at this point. So, with that, let's go into the main card. We've got the Cruiserweight Championship. Rich Swann taking on Neville. Neville absolutely should win the title. I think he's been very good for the Cruiserweight division. He's giving them a strong heel to kind of center the division around. And I feel like the payoff should be him beating Rich Swann for the title. I think that's the way to go. And I honestly, they've really improved the Cruiserweight division. It's still not perfect. I think one of the problems with 205 Live is that it follows SmackDown, and I think they're performing in front of a tired crowd. I think that's a problem. I think if they considered putting 205 Live on before SmackDown, they'd have a much hotter crowd, and I think the crowd that was there to see SmackDown would still be alive for SmackDown, if that makes any sense. Because I feel like the crowd is there for SmackDown, and 205 Live is just something tacked on. And they don't really have much of a reason to care about it. But I think if you put that part of the show first, maybe the crowd would be more energized for 205 Live, and then hopefully stay alive for SmackDown Live. But we'll see. Or no, we won't. They're actually not going to make that change. But anyway, but yeah, they have improved the Cruiserweight division by having these feuds. But I think Neville should absolutely win the belt here. I think he's a more interesting character. I think he's what the division needs, and he's the guy I would go with at this point. So I say he takes it. Charlotte versus Bayley for the women's title. Charlotte's going to retain. Bayley's won all the non-title matches, so it's like, okay, champion's going to retain, and they want to protect Charlotte's undefeated on pay-per-view title match streak. I think they want to protect that. Which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. So I'm going to pick Charlotte to retain. We've got the WWE title, AJ Styles versus John Cena. I've already seen 2 of their matches, so I expect this one to be a finisher fest like the other 2 were. Cena's going to win the title. I'm almost 100% certain that Cena's going to win the title. But at least, AJ beat him like 2 or 3 times before this. So it's not like AJ just got mercilessly fed to John Cena on a silver platter. It's like, all right, at least he beat Cena more often than he lost to him. And then him dropping the belt to Cena actually feels like the babyface had to struggle and achieve something rather than just winning, because you got to send the fans home happy. So at least it feels like there's some kind of a payoff here. And hey, at least they didn't feed AJ to Undertaker, which I thought they were going to do. It's like, oh god, I can't watch AJ lose to Undertaker at this point. That would hurt. But like Cena, I'm just like, whatever. Fine. It's like, I don't even care. It's less bad than Undertaker at this point. But, yeah, I think the crowd's going to be super hot for this match. I think it's going to be more the same of what we've seen before. But it should be an exciting bout with Cena winning the title and, and then we have the Universal title match, Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens, with Chris Jericho locked in a shark cage, and I think they've already said that this match is going to be no DQ. Unless Goldberg versus Lesnar at Mania is going to be for the title, and Goldberg wins the belt at like Fastlane or whatever the February show that he's working. I expect Roman Reigns to win the title here. I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Owens retains. To me, that's an indicator that Brock Lesnar is going to win the Rumble, and Goldberg's going to beat Kevin Owens at Fastlane and win the title. And then it's going to be Goldberg Lesnar at WrestleMania for the title, because fuck you, that's why. But if I'm 90% sure that Roman Reigns is going to win the title here, even with what happened on Raw where he came out on top. Because I'm pretty sure they're going to do Owens versus Jericho for the U.S. title at WrestleMania. Again, which I'm fine with. Those two deserve to have a storyline-focused match at WrestleMania, given they've been a major fixture of things. But, Roman Reigns and John Cena are probably going to walk out of this pay-per-view with both belts, which... whatever. Whatever. I think Kevin Owens has a better chance of retaining than AJ does, but I wouldn't put money on it. But from there, let's go into the Royal Rumble match itself, which is going to help shape WrestleMania. I'm looking ahead to what the WrestleMania card looks like it's going to be. Triple H versus Seth Rollins obviously is a given, so neither of those guys are winning the Rumble. Seth's already out of the Rumble based on what happened on Raw this week. We're going to get Goldberg and Lesnar, which may or may not be for the title. We'll see. Again, I think the outcome of the Reigns-Owens match will determine whether or not Lesnar wins the Rumble. I think, trying to look ahead, I've already said like Enzo and Cass versus New Day in some capacity will probably happen. Jericho versus Owens for the U.S. title, most likely. You're probably going to get an IC title 7-way match with like AJ, Miz, Ziggler, Corbin, Orton, Bray, like all like the SmackDown guys that are like mid to upper mid card. Or like main event level, they're probably all going to get crammed into a ladder match because, But yeah, other than that though, the Royal Rumble, those matches I feel like are somewhat set, and you're going to get the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal as well. Those matches I feel like are at least somewhat set. The Rumble winner is going to give us a better picture of what we're going to get at WrestleMania, at least on the main event side of things go. Are we going to get Undertaker versus Roman Reigns? Are we going to get Undertaker versus John Cena? Are we going to get something completely different? I mean, I have some ideas. Now, my number one prediction to win the Royal Rumble, and it's a win that would kind of piss me off a little bit, my number one pick is The Undertaker, I think, because old guys rule, and nostalgia is the most powerful drug on the planet, and the show's in Texas, and I'm like, they're going to give it to fucking Taker, aren't they? And so, my number one pick is Taker. However, there are other options. There are other possibilities, and I want to outline some of those right here. And I think that there's a chance that some of these things could happen. Braun Strowman, I think, is a possibility to win it as like a shock win. He's a big monster guy that they've somewhat protected. At least better than like Big Show or Kane or anybody like that. Like, he actually does feel like a big monster based on the way they booked him. And I think they might try to do Roman versus Roman versus Strowman for the Universal title. A match that will not work at WrestleMania. Mainly because the fans are not going to give a shit about Roman Reigns going up against this big monster. And they're actually probably going to... They're either going to cheer the monster over him and get no sympathy over him, or the fans are going to be bored out of their skull and not say anything. So not the best way to use Braun Strowman, but I think that match is a possibility. So I wouldn't be surprised if Strowman won the Rumble, even though Undertaker's my top pick. Other options, I've already mentioned Lesnar. If Owens retains the Universal title, Lesnar's probably going to win the Rumble, and then Goldberg's going to beat Owens for the title. And Goldberg-Lesnar for the title, dems to breaks. Other possibilities, and I take for the ideas I'm about to present, I take absolutely no credit for them. My friend Eric Clancy, my co-host over on the Weekday Warriors of Wrestling podcast that I do, he came up with these ideas, and I think they're very interesting. He has suggested that we might get Finn Balor versus The Undertaker. I don't know if Finn is going to be cleared to work the Rumble, but there are a lot of spots for the Royal Rumble that are still open. And there's a lot of guys that could pop in. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne showed up, the two finalists in the UK Championship Tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if Kurt Angle showed up as a surprise entrant. There was a lot of talk about Kenny Omega, but he doesn't seem very likely at this point. But he seems to be screwing with he seems to be working the internet. So I wouldn't count on Kenny Omega actually being in this match. Yeah, they love to have the Royal Rumble surprise entrance, so I wouldn't be shocked at all if Kurt Angle appeared. I highly doubt he'd win, but one idea. Well, I've already mentioned Finn Balor. So there's a possibility that he might come back and win the Rumble. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if, whether a title's involved or not, I wouldn't be surprised if Finn Balor versus Undertaker happened at WrestleMania. I think that's an interesting matchup, and I think WWE is high on Finn and would want to give him that spot. And again, this wasn't my idea. This came from Eric Clancy, but another idea that came from him, a shock win to win the Royal Rumble, Samoa Joe. And the idea behind that, and it was really something that when Eric said it, it kind of clicked inside my brain. It's like, oh wait, Joe's not on the NXT card. Yeah, there's a possibility that Joe could actually be a Royal Rumble entrant. And what if he actually won the thing? Because that's the other thing. They keep doing these surprise entrants, but none of them even have a chance of winning the Royal Rumble. So it's kind of like, unless it's somebody like a returning star like Cena in '08, who's already like an established full-timer that was just on the shelf for injury reasons. Most of the surprise entrants, like the Over the Hill guys or the surprise debuts like AJ last year, we don't think of those guys as having a chance to win the Royal Rumble. But what if they bring Joe up to the main roster and he wins the Royal Rumble? That would give John Cena his opponent for the WWE title, and you could play off the fact that they were both, talents based out of California that had very different career paths, and give Cena a fresher match instead of feeding him to, having him work with, Dean Ambrose or Dolph Ziggler or somebody like that who nobody views as any kind of a threat. I think that's an interesting possibility. So I wouldn't be shocked if Joe was a Royal Rumble entrant, and I think maybe him actually winning the match would be the huge shock of the year, if nothing else, and it would lend more credibility to the surprise entrant aspect of the Royal Rumble and make it a little bit more interesting whenever somebody unannounced actually shows up in the thing. So yeah, those are kind of my ideas on who might win the Royal Rumble. Like I said, Undertaker's my number one pick, but I think Strowman's likely. I think Lesnar is likely, and Joe and Balor are kind of my two potential shock winners that we wouldn't be expecting. So keep your eyes open. You never know what'll happen. Like I said, I will not be seeing either show live because I'll be in the process of moving. So. My reviews of those shows will probably pop up whenever I get my new place straightened out, so I don't know when that's going to be. It might be a little bit later in the week, but again, we'll see. Royal Rumble has a chance to be a very interesting show, and like I said, I think the card looks better than the NXT Takeover card, so if Takeover manages to be the better show again, then I'll just throw my hands up and go, I don't know what's going on. But, so those are my discussions on the two shows. Now let's do my classic match review, as voted on by you guys for the poll I posted on Twitter. I said since it's January, I wanted to review not a classic Royal Rumble match, but a classic Raw match, since January marks the anniversary of when Raw first came on the air. And the matches I selected to vote on were Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair from '93, a very early episode. I think it was the third episode overall. Bret Hart versus 1-2-3 Kid from 1994, not 1995, like I said in the poll. Thank you for correcting me. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks for the correction there. Much appreciated. And from 1997, Austin and Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart and the British Bulldog for the WWF tag titles. The winner of the poll was Ric Flair versus Mr. Perfect from '93 in a loser leaves WWF match. And I remember watching that match. I was 7 years old at the time. And that was the first Raw match that I felt like I couldn't miss. That just felt like, oh my god, Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair are fighting each other and the loser leaves? That's crazy. And it was the first Raw match that felt like a big main event that couldn't be missed. And it was like a can't miss special match. And that was a big deal for Monday Night Raw. That was a big deal to have something like that so early in their run, because the first main event they did was Undertaker versus Damien Demento. I don't have to tell you, not the most interesting match in the world, especially since Undertaker pretty much just killed him anyway. So to have something like this was actually pretty neat, and was the first step towards getting Raw to being like that quote-unquote pay-per-view quality that we would eventually see during the Monday Night Wars once Nitro came on the block. Because that was the other thing. Back in those days, not everybody showed up on Raw every week. You would go, Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair, that might have been, I don't know for sure, but that might have been the first time either one of them even wrestled on Raw. And for one of those guys, it was going to be the last time, as far as we knew. So Um, yeah, I thought the match at the time was a big deal, and it's a big standout, especially in those early Raws. And it's very important from that standpoint. Having rewatched it, and let me say that there are a lot of classic matches from my childhood that hold up very well, and I loved them as a kid, and when I watch them again as an adult, they hold up. Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam totally holds up. Savage Steamboat totally holds up. Hogan Savage from 5. Hogan Warrior from 6. Warrior Savage from 7. Bret and Piper from WrestleMania 8. Flair and Savage from WrestleMania 8. You know, those classic matches. The Sting Vader matches from WCW. Flair and Steamboat, those matches. Those matches hold up. Most of the matches I thought were great as a kid typically do hold up when I rewatch them as an adult. This one did not. Having rewatched this one, I was like, man, that match was not very good. And when you look at who's involved, Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair, and they'd had a storyline brewing, they had a feud going. Cause I remember leading into Survivor Series 92, it was supposed to be Ric Flair and Razor Ramon versus Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior. Warrior left the company, and Mr. Perfect stepped in, ultimately going against Bobby Heenan and Ric Flair and joining up with Savage to be Savage's partner, and it was Mr. Perfect's return to the ring as well. Because remember, he spent over a year as Ric Flair's, I forget the exact term was, like managing consultant or something like that, in a non-wrestling capacity. It was weird to see Mr. Perfect as a manager, but he was injured at the time, so they had to give him something to do. And yeah, so they'd had the feud going, started at Survivor Series 92, and it was building. At the Royal Rumble, Mr. Perfect eliminated Ric Flair and prevented him from being a back-to-back winner of the Royal Rumble. So that added fuel to the fire leading into this match. The Royal Rumble had actually just happened right before this particular event. So you've got the storyline, you've got the talent. I don't know what happened. The match just wasn't very good. I mean, this should have been a really hot, dramatic match, and instead it was just kind of, I don't know, it was a little sloppy at points. The crowd didn't seem all that into it. The commentary was terrible. People talk about those early Raws and how bad the commentary was. They're not kidding. I mean, Rob Bartlett is awful. I mean, he was just terrible. And he was silent through most of this match. And he would just randomly pop up every few minutes or so. I was like, whoa, what the hell? He just spoke. What the hell was that? McMahon was awful and just just not properly selling anything that was going on. The only one that was doing his job well was Bobby, and that's because his character had a financial interest in Ric Flair. So he actually did sound like he was invested in what was going on, and Bobby did the best he could, but, you can't carry crap. And so the commentary was annoying, and the match had bits of sloppiness in it, and I don't know, it's just, you would think that those two would have a great match together, and it just, at that time, it just didn't click. I saw a match that they had in WCW years later for the U.S. title that was great, but that one, this one just didn't hold up, and I don't know why. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe, it just didn't happen. Some nights it just doesn't happen, and it's a shame that it came off as poorly as it did, because it was Ric Flair's last match with the company till he came back in 2001. And actually, he didn't wrestle. He came back in 2001, but he didn't wrestle until Royal Rumble 2002. So this was Ric Flair's last match in the WWF for 9 years. And it's a shame that on his way out the door, he has this kind of shitball match. And it's like, okay. I mean, I'm probably being harder on it than I should, but when you think of the stakes that are involved and the talents that are involved, you'd expect a better match out of these two. And it just, I don't know, it just didn't click. It's a shame, but it is what it is. But I will give the match credit. It is historically significant for being the first major Raw main event. And being the first significant main event in Raw's history, so that when similar matches were done down the road, it would make Raw feel more important and more can't miss as those type of matches were featured more prominently. But, not a very good match. I expected better. That was one, I remember it being so much better when I was a kid, but Man, it's not a good feeling. It's one of the reasons I joked about this a few months ago when I almost reviewed the King of the Road match between Dustin Rhodes and Barry Darsow. As a kid, I thought that match was the coolest match ever, and I know if I went back and rewatched it, I know it would be terrible. I just know it would be terrible. And I kind of don't want to rewatch it. It's like, no, let's just leave that memory pure. Let's just leave it untainted. But yeah, Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair from Raw 1993. Not a very good match. Hopefully next month when I do my classic match review again, I'll have a much better match to review. But, like I said, that is all I've got for you today. And like I said, this will be the last time that I will be filming a video in this apartment. Hopefully my new surroundings are pleasing to you and make for a good setting for future videos. But until then, peace out, everybody.